Hello and welcome back to the Timeless Moments podcast. My name is Spoken Priestess, the African Powerpuff Girl. It is Africa Month, so you already know I'm excited. We are celebrating Africa and we are having conversations about how African creatives create from inspiration, from culture, and from all things African. Today I have amazing guests. We have Thamsanqa Majela, who is a choreographer and dancer, an SBYA for Dance 2022. We also have the amazing Muneyi. We also have Cara Stacey, who is our SBYA for Music 2021. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming through Africa Month. Personally, it's like my birthday, so I love this. I'm so excited to have you all here. I'm really excited to dig into how you guys intertwine your various arts into Africanism, identity, expression, and also throwing forward into the future of where we're going as creatives in Africa. So I'm just going to be throwing questions around that are obviously relevant to all of you, but some of them will apply. And if you want to chip in, please do just say, let me just add on. Let's have that. I'm going to start with you, Thamsanqa. I've got to go in a line like this. One, two, three, next. Thamsanqa, I say your name wrong. Thamsanqa. It's very important for me to get it right.
Thank you.
You are an accomplished choreographer, dancer. You've shown and you've danced and performed in Switzerland, Mozambique, Madagascar. You name it. How is your dance style received globally, right? Because you are an African storyteller and your subject is very diverse, but also intrinsic in identity, belonging, sexuality. And, you know, quite plainly put, some of these subjects are quite heavy subjects in our communities. Globally, how do people receive your work?
Nkosi, thanks. First of all, would you bring your Sikamalan? But
As I should. First of all, there's no reason to not get your invite.
yeah, but thanks. I think how is my work received? I think it's received in a way, would say, in a connecting way, in a connection sense, more than okay, I'm a beautiful dancer, you know, the work is beautiful. But I think my aim now also from then, and it's much stronger now, would say, you know what, I want to connect with people, and also I want that to be my style. Would say, his style is connecting with people. I think it's more than like what I'm talking. It's more than what I'm talking about. I think I do start with what I'm talking about, but then I want you to connect with that. So it's been received very well, especially the topics that we speak about. Like for me, it's like communal issues, and you know, the hardships and the great moments, which has, you know, celebratory works as well. So for me, it's been received well, as long as you connect, and then, you know, even people who are strangers, like especially, for example, France, somebody would come and like, oh my God, you know, crying. And then it's okay, you know. It's, you don't know me, but you understand something. You understand what I'm saying. I think through everyone's art is that connection. Yeah.
Dance is a language. I love how you say that you want to connect with people and you're telling stories. And, you know, if somebody didn't know that you're a dancer, you speak it, one would assume that you're a scriptwriter or a musician. You speak it as a language. When you're about to do a dance piece or choreograph something, how does the story become the dance? You know, like how do you actually go through the process of this is what I want to talk about and what does it look like in dance? You know, I'm really curious about that process.
You know, processes, they differ. It's not the same process all the time. I'm sure Nani you would say. But for me, it's starting from a place where how is my heart beating? Why is it beating like this? Why am I so edgy? You know, why am I sad? You know, it's that thing, why am I sad? And then I take that impulse or that emotion or that drive. Then sometimes you put your music, go into studio in the dark, and then you just switch off everything and then start dancing. And then you start feeling that, okay, this dance wants quirky movements or something very staccato, very, very, you know, or something that's just lyrical. You know, for me, that's where it starts, that, okay, it needs softness. So everything should be at ease. That's the thing. So even if I can do anything, but also the connection is there, then everything. So I can't really say it's dictated, but oh, let me start with a forte or something, you know. Yeah, pirate.
I love that. I love that, especially on the topic of language, which is something that is very, very close to you, Muneyi. You are a Tshivenda performing artist. Your music is based on folklore and much, much, much influenced by traditions and culture. Tshivenda is one of the languages that we don't get in a lot of commercial spaces or rather mainstream music industry or music culture. And you were really purposeful in saying, I'm going to be an ambassador for my language and my people. Let's talk about the conversation around our eroding languages, right? A lot of young people today don't really speak a lot of their languages. But at the same time, it's like we're living in a futuristic world. We're not really in touch with our grandmothers or like our ways that we had in the village versus in the city. As young people today, how do you think we can preserve our languages?
Well, thank you, firstly, for having me. I think language preservation begins with, being seen, with representation, and just accepting that we're all diverse in our identities, in our tribes, cultures. I think if we all start saying that, and recognizing each other, then we're able to see the need for preservation, And as much as the world is growing and changing, there's no point if the world is going to grow and become one thing, then it just becomes a white room with white furniture and everything is just one color, I think it's very important that, from the media, like mainstream media even, from radio stations, from TV, it usually sounds so far-fetched when you mention that, but like as a Tshivenda speaking person, I know there's probably 3 shows that cater for my language. But if there's more representation, then more people are able to learn. More people are able to pick up phrases. The same way like we all know, maybe a Latin phrase or a French phrase because it's represented. So I think it begins with representation, so that children can see it, and when they see it, it doesn't feel foreign. It doesn't feel marginalized. It doesn't feel uncool, because a lot of things that are brought out that don't appeal to mainstream media always seem like they're uncool, and you have to be that one outlier, that one person who's representing this one thing. So if we generalize it and make it accessible to everyone, then we would have done the job.
I absolutely love that. It's true. It's you're afraid to stick out and be like, no, we're all going this way. Why are you? So I get that. When you were speaking about hearing stuff more often, you pick up phrases, and I beamed inside because when I was listening to your music, I was picking up stuff, picking up notes. There's a song that you had, Lufuno, and when you had released it a few years ago, it was one of your singles, and it was a big topic of conversation, love. Is it in any way linked to the Lufuno Loduanabad? I know that song at least.
That's interesting because only last year, I remember like at one of the rehearsals, we were rehearsing, and that line came up, and I was telling these people that growing up there was a song that spoke about this, but I can't say it's not, I can't say in the general sphere of things it's not. That the theme is the same, it's about love lost, but also that was the intention behind the song. It was my first single, and the intention was also to sort of like play to stereotypes. There's certain names that non-Tshivenda speaking people know,
Right.
Everyone knows a Mashidu. The same way like if you're a non, Zulu speaker, then you'll know a Sipo. If you're a non-Zwana speaker, you'll know a Tepo. So I wanted to use that as my entryway to like use these catchphrases, these little trigger words, and use Rufuno, as a word that means love, and also as a popular name in Venda, which again, has been used in multiple other songs, like the one you've mentioned. So it was a little bit of a trick on my side, but I'll never deny the influence of all the music I heard growing up, and the themes, and my approach to my own songs using how other people thematically approach theirs. So I think the inspiration is there.
I like that. I wanna double tap on that because I wanna go back to genres you listened to when you were younger, when we think back to our influences and where we get some of our inspiration from. Cara, your love language is African instruments. You are classically trained in piano and other instruments, I assume. But your love is with, the finger bows and those kind of instruments. I'm curious to know, while you were doing your, curricula, or while you were studying and training yourself in classical music, how you actually decided that this is the route that I want to take and this is what I actually want to focus on in my career as a musician.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, go.
I mean, I think I was kind of lucky because the sound of the instruments that I was hearing at that time it resonated a little bit, because I had, as a child, had a tape when I was like in nursery school. I had a tape of different Indian.
The one that we use with a pen.
Exactly. And I killed that tape. So it was like, at that time, obviously, I didn't know what the instruments were. I just knew those kinds of sounds. And then I heard them again, I was at university, I was already much, much older. And it's just the sounds of these instruments are so beautiful. So that kind of caught me initially. Obviously being a white person working in indigenous instruments is kind of complicated. There are lots of interesting pitfalls and things to think of and ethical issues to consider. But I think my love for the sound of the instruments has just kept me there. And through those instruments, I've met the most incredible musicians, the most generous teachers. I've had some of the best musical experiences. I think I might not have had them if I hadn't just heard those instruments and just had this real connection with those sounds. So it's a mix of different things. I mean, not all these instruments are the same, but it's mostly musical bows, but also imbira and nyunga, so some of the thumb pianos as well. But yeah, once you start hearing those sounds and just hearing how complex and intriguing they are, and never mind that, I mean, the songs that people write on those instruments, it connects to what both of you have been saying. Like, they're telling stories that are so deep. They have knowledge in them that I think we're losing a little bit, that everybody can learn from, even if you didn't grow up with that culture. So they just seem like really rich archives of sound and stories that everyone should be paying more attention to, I think.
That's so beautiful. I'm curious about academics and that, right? Because you can't have the chords, or there's no scale on a thumb piano type of thing. And so I guess that makes it challenging to either study or either curriculize. Like, what's the exam? So how do you bring this raw, untapped indigenous language into the academic space?
Look, it's difficult. I think universities all around and schools kind of struggle with this, and just teaching in this way that it's not the traditional way you would have learned. There are lots of adaptations that have to happen. But the reality is that in many traditions all around the world, people learn in this intuitive way. They learn by ear. They use their memory on lots of different instruments, lots of different styles. So in some ways, it's actually maybe a little bit, might be controversial, but a more natural way of learning music. And that's why for me, shifting from classical studies, it was like forcing myself into one kind of shape. And then when I picked up these instruments, it just happened naturally. And all kinds of things just flowed. So I was like, oh, this makes so much sense in terms of how we can learn an instrument and learn how to play and learn to engage with music. It's hard when you try and fit that into a university space where you've got to tick boxes and you have to get sign off on a repertoire and all kinds of things that are very Eurocentric, and they just don't fit these traditions. So this is an issue that I think people, deal with a lot.
That's so beautiful.
No, that's beautiful what you said. I'm also thinking, especially with the learning, especially with the academic learning, it's I know in dance, like we do, like I like improvisation. So I do a lot of improvisation, and sometimes you can't explain it. It's something that with learning as well, like two together, like we go through an experience, and sometimes you can't write down the experience. You can't say this is how you should be experiencing this. And I think also looking at the institutions, I think also they should be able to include that kind of learning, that some other things cannot be notated. You'll be ruining it if you like start writing it down. But I think also, especially in the Black culture and things like that, we don't like to write a lot because we like to experience things and then pass that knowledge, and so that somebody can experience it. And like reading it, then reading is different. I think there are certain things that you should read. There are certain things that you should experience, and then pass that. And also, I think then that knowledge is passed, and then we can all adapt to that the changing knowledge. And like saying, oh no, that's the knowledge. Then that's where the problem is, that we don't adapt as a community. And
it's prescriptive. It's prescriptive. You're right. It's also it's the stages of life, right? Where I am when I taught this might be different 5 years later. Like I mentioned, language today is going through some interesting things. So then how do you do when this book is dated? And also it's spirit. You can't really document or like curriculize spirit.
that grows.
Yeah. Speaking of teaching, you do release classes in your workshops and your teaching. What are release classes? How do they work, and what's their purpose?
So released, I think already saying release. So release, I studied in TUT in Pretoria, and then I went to study in Belgium, Performing Arts Research and Training Studio, long sentence. So there it's a European technique that you learn, but then there's like the release technique. So you learn about the bones, you learn about the bone marrows, you learn about the muscles and how to release that and the tension. I think for me it's just like releasing the tension when you dance. So that's why then you start dancing like a Marriott puppet thingy. So for me, release is that, but also it goes beyond that for me, because then I use breath. I incorporate it with stretching, and also how to release from the inside, so that you can be that dancer and then release that spirit. Release technique is for me is that, so that you don't get out and hurt yourself, because then often we walk around with tension. Even people, there's tension every time, so we need to release, and that's through breathing, through breath, and reminding yourself to breathe and your body to breathe, and then dance.
That's beautiful. So that mirror dancing and the shower, it's a serious thing. It's a serious thing, release. Speaking of release, music naturally is something that a lot of people can relate to in terms of it being released, even more than just for the artist. Your work in 2021 was a lot of it was reflecting on lockdown and just kind of everything that was going on in that time, mentally as well. You also have a song called Wurudu. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but it sounds like a Pedi word that says Wudutu as well, which is like boredom or like solace. As a creative, solace is double-edged. It's either good for you or it kind of drives you crazy. How do you find your release? How do you find your balance? And how do you stay in love with the music going through that double edge of, I don't feel like it today, and this music industry sucks. Like there's just always two things going on with the creative in that solace.
Yes, the music industry really sucks. But anyone will say it.
I know what you mean, but we're doing our best. We out here.
The music industry sucks, but the music doesn't. And I think, I always tell people, like, when I travel with my guitar, even if I'm not going on holiday or going to do non-music related things. And I had someone ask me, why do you travel with your guitar? And I've told them, because it's mine. It's how I soothe myself. It's how it's sort of part of my release as well. So what I do is I've learned to sort of partition the work into two. So, I make music, I'm a musician, and that will always be the case, regardless of whether I do it commercially or not. And I'm also aware of what my commercial, or rather my work obligations are. So even in spaces where, say, I'm at a show and I'm not exactly in the space to show up for that, where I don't feel like I'd rather be sleeping that day, but I have to show up for this thing. I constantly have to remind myself that, that these are my obligations. And because the music lives, the music lives by itself and it lives in me, it becomes easier to sort of tap into that frequency, of function, and I call it a frequency of function, because in that particular moment, it's there to serve someone else's needs other than my own, because I can always do that by myself at my own time, either by playing for myself or by going to watch someone else, play a show. So that sort of helps me strike that balance, you know. A show is maybe 3 hours altogether, including sound check and post show, whatever. And, you know, if I'm dedicating 3 hours of my day to my work and to showing up, whether I feel like it or not, for me, that's enough. You know, it's done its function. And also over time, you learn what it does to other people. You know, when you're on your day, on that one day when you're not feeling like being there, but you still show up and you show up with your full heart. And, you know, and like Tammy was saying that, you know, like someone will come to you crying, like, oh my God, you know, that really touched me. It keeps you, it's the motivating factor for the function, you know. So when I show up at a gig, you know, there's this feeling that, you know, I might not want to be here, but all these people dedicated their money and their time to be here, for watching me do this for this hour. So I need to respect that. I need to respect myself, and I also just need to show up for the craft. So for me, that keeps things balanced, and then I can go home and cry about the industry.
Oh, that's beautiful. You spoke about traveling with your guitar, and you're self-taught. I learned that you grew up listening to Batanga amongst other music influences, I'm sure. Is that the reason why you picked up the guitar?
Not even.
Okay.
Funny, I'd always loved musical instruments, but, you know, like at my school, you know, they were not really focused on that. You know, it was a hectically academic school. You know, I was in the lab most of the time in high school, you know, like if I was going to be a great scientist, like Differentiates or something. But when I got to varsity in first year, you know, there was this friend of mine who had a little community church, and she had a guitar. And I also had these new friends I had made who were part of like a small Christian band, you know, and they played guitars. And at the time I had never really played guitar, so I asked to learn, and they gave me this book called Guitar for Beginners. And I just read the book, you know, casually. I didn't have a guitar. I returned the book, and then on another day, like, my friend asked if she could leave her guitar by me, and I just picked up the guitar, and I remembered some of the basic things. You know, not everything, you know, I remember some of the basic things. And that's sort of like how I started, you know. I started skipping class to just play guitar in my room. And because there was no one to teach me, like, oh, you do it this way, this is, you know, how you play like a major pentatonic scale or whatever. And, you know, I would just figure things out. And I think that sort of like also helped me define my sound on the guitar, you know, because I was there figuring things out, like, oh, this is, you know, a pattern for this in my own way. And then that's when all the influences come out, you know, because nothing comes out of vacuum. So even as you're figuring out this sound, you know, there's a part of you that's like, oh, this feels so familiar, you know. Then it's the influences from either Oliver growing up, or Ingane Zoma, or all these other people that I grew up hearing on the radio. Then you hear those influences, you know, accompanied by my own experiences and just my own technique.
I love that. I love the figuring it out, you know, because I think that's what being African is figuring it out, guys. There's no formula for being African. Everything is figuring it out, whether it's cooking, dressing, music, we're just figuring it out. And this is very relevant to you, Cara, in figuring it out, because you're in this world where you are a scholar, you're a doctorate in African, you have a doctorate in African music, but you're also in a space where there's no formula per se. And how do you create the music? So you play it and it's, you know, it's freestyle and the bow is flowing and the spirit is going. But when you get into a studio and you have to create a record with all these, you know, kind of free instruments, how does that recording process go? How do you create that kind of music?
I think there's no real process or no set process.
Figuring it out, different processes. Right.
But I think also because, you know, I think like with most artists, it's not even to do with academia. Most artists, you're thinking about a concept, there's some kind of issue, there's some kind of state you're in, or it's an emotional thing, or even a technical thing to do with the craft that you're trying to resolve, or you're interested in some way. Not that it's a problem, but there's something intriguing you. So I think each time I've been in studio, it's been like, I think also because, you know, I'm not playing traditional repertoire. I mean, I've studied it and I've learned it, and I don't feel like it's my place to play that music. So I have to, you know, I want to still play the instruments, but I also want to play them in lots of different spaces. So how do they sound with prepared piano? How do they sound with lots of guitar pedals? And like, what is the sound that comes out of that? You know, I guess I'm still trying to work out what that sound is and And because I'm a bit schizophrenic, it chops and changes all the time. So each project is kind of different. And I think my approach has been quite DIY. Like, I have a lot of role models, but none of them are doing exactly what I'm doing. So I'm just see what happens and also be okay with failure, like if an experiment doesn't work out. But each recording project has had a different compositional approach or completely free improvisation as well, which is totally different approach. And then afterwards, I think I'm okay with listening back and saying, okay, I really like that. And I really do not like that, but that's what happened. And each time you learn from that. And then it, a year later, I'm thinking about those instruments or even other instruments completely. Like, I've been writing a lot of music just for a totally different kind of ensemble now. But still some of the structures of that I've learned through these instruments are kind of in my mind as I write for completely different instruments. So it's like, yeah, the inspiration and the process are kind of varying as time goes on. And I guess because my music is also not super commercially accessible, I'm kind of free to do that. I don't have to worry about it being very popular or and then it becomes popular in some small, interesting niche ways. But that means I'm lucky to have that position because I don't have to think about that. I can think about the music in the purest way that I can.
That's a gift. Your child finding you is such a gift. And I want to come back to your process of creating. It's not schizophrenia. You're beautifully and colorfully gifted. You have so much access to this magic. And you're just like a magician, just throwing these things on the ball, and that's how it feels. Yes, yeah. So that's what it is. It's not schizophrenia. It's being a magician. It's being a magician. Let's wrap it up. I want to wrap it up by throwing into the future, and then also just getting honestly what it is for you to be African. So I'm going to start with throwing into the future. Where to now? There's so many conversations to be had. We've been having a lot of conversations as humans since the test of time, but I think we're only starting to scratch the surface on the really hard conversations, and that's again something that's your topic, Tammy, as your work in dance and representing community, sexuality, and just blackness somewhat. Where are we going in the art space, especially when it comes to dance and storytelling?
Sure, yeah.
Or what do you at least see? Because you can't know where to go it, but yeah.
No, some other things are just there, and like it's just gotta connect. I'm working on a work now. As in my new work. It's titled "Don't Let the Sun Set on You Here." And it's the same thing. The what we're talking about, the future. I've been also meditating on what the future is. Where are we going? And in this thinking, I'm still in the process. And I'm questioning what it is like to be dancing in the future. What is dance in the future? As opposed to also looking at... But now with this, for me to get to there, I'm not even answering it. I had to go to a place, I had to go to in Tanzania for a research. And now for me, I think it's my journey, like really looking at what is dancing in the future is for me to go back in the past. I'm realizing that now. I'm also trained in Europe. I've got that Western training and things, but now it's like really life is just like you need to go back if you want to also be in the future. And I don't know. Also with this, I like it. I love it. So I can't really say what is dance in the future. I don't even know, and I think that's the beauty of it. But I think that my comfort is going like knowing what is African, what is being an African, why are we dancing. But I think the most thing is connection. We want to be a community. It's hard to be a community, but we want to dance together. I think don't let the sun set on you here. Don't stay for too long, but also don't. You need to be, there's something here. It's quite weird. Don't let the sun set on you here. Is it dangerous? Or am I going to experience more if I stay? So I don't like...
Sure. Yeah. So beautiful. It's, what's interesting about art is that you have your own story or your own experience or reference when you're creating it. And when somebody receives it, it's something else. You know, when you said that, I thought of something in my own life where that was very relevant, you know. So I'm excited for you because I know you will figure it out. And in fact, it will come into what it needs to be. So that's very, very beautiful.
Sorry, ask me today. I could.
No, never days. Go.
But I think, yeah, it's beautiful. I'm sure, like, we all create, we all get into that space. It's nice. I think for me, I ask myself a question, but I also don't want it to be answered. But I want to lay the experiences, and also, that's what I love with my work. I present something, and how you receive it. I'm not trying to say this is this, but I've made this. How does it look for you, or how does it taste for you? How does it sound for you? Then we can have a conversation. But that's why I also sometimes say synopsis. What is this piece about? I don't know.
I don't know either. Just what you turns out to be is what it is. I love that. Muneyi, what does folk, futuristic, popular music sound like? Because I just made that up. You're a folk singer, but we're in the future and things are popular, you know. So what does that look like for a Chivenda kid in Toyando, and they want to express themselves just like Muneyi does?
Funny, no, I share sentiments with Tammy. I think it's about going back, you know, and especially because after I put out my body of work, I felt like I had done that, you know. I felt like I had referenced enough. I felt like I had sort of gone back enough, but lately I keep feeling like, you know, there's so much in just going back, you know, and going back to, you know, to what did music sound like, you know, before it was recorded. Even what did it sound like before language evolved to a certain point, and just wanting to explore that, you know, but not wanting to be stuck there, you know. Again, like what Tammy said, you know, it's like there's so much beauty in going back to that place and taking what you take out of it, and also just like leaving room for what it has to offer. So sonically, there's been a lot of experimenting, you know, trying hard to not experiment from a commercial point of view, just like listening to the heart and like what's the song in the air right now, and how does this song link to the song that was, you know, in the atmosphere 100 years ago or a century ago. So that's where I'm at. And, you know, again, you know, there's anxiety, like, will it be commercially viable or not? But I think at the end of the day, like, for me, the future is just about being happy with the work that's made. It's like, I want to look back 20 years back and think that was an honest piece of work that did not do well commercially, that I'm happy with. Should that be the case, you know, God forbid, but I want to be constantly happy. And I think that's why I'm going to bridge the gap between then, now, and, you know, the future of the Afro-folk music for myself.
I love that, Sankofa. The Ghanaians call it Sankofa. I don't know if you've seen it's an Adinkra symbol with the bird, and the head of the bird is facing backwards. Sankofa, it means go back, you know. Yeah, it's go back. Yeah. So when you guys keep saying it, I'm like, Sankofa, you know, it's an actual thing where in their culture they will. I can't say in their culture because not all Ghanaians are from the same tribe. I know. But I know I have to be specific, but you know, the reference is that, you know, go back. You have to go back to take what you need to go forward. Yes. Cara, what is the future of magical potion piano flamboyant?
I mean, I hope it's a good life for those instruments. You know, very few people actually play them, you know, but increasingly I'm seeing, you know, through a few kind of odd educational efforts, like the fact that I learned these instruments at university, at UCT, where quite a lot of people have also come, you know, since me and learned these instruments, but then integrated them into other kinds of fusion musics and integrated if not those instruments, but also those ideas into the music, I'm seeing a lot of really interesting artists come up with these fusions and then take those sounds and those instruments and those ideas to different spaces. So that makes me feel really good. But simultaneously, I also know that there's so many of these instruments that we're kind of losing or we've even lost already. So it's not good to feel paranoid and distressed about that, because we are living in this strange time of change. But I like to think that those instruments, just like stories, and I think this is the power of art in general, is that there's a connection. There's an emotional connection. People feel connected to your work maybe in ways you didn't anticipate. And that creates a link. And I think, I'm just seeing a lot of really interesting projects emerge that use these instruments or play around with these ideas to do with identity and different local South African and Southern African identities and fusions, So I think that's really powerful. And I hope that carries on. And I think, we're living in this weird time of climate change and all these things. There's so many things outside of the arts which are making us look back to a time when maybe we were a bit gentler in lots of ways, and kind of knowledges that are a bit fragile right now that we should be learning from. So I think, whatever your position is in South Africa, we're a very diverse and crazy kind of country. But I think there's so much knowledge that has been in this place that we all need to tap into in order to move forward in a really positive way. So yeah, and I think these instruments have a part to play in that process.
That's amazing. I love that. Don't stop creating. You bump into that thumb piano, you pick it up. Any instrument, pick it up. Like, I actually have one, and now that you say that, I'm like, pick it up. I should also magic potion this out, Man, thank you so much for joining us. Before we leave, I need to get a quick one from each of you. What does it mean to be African? Tommy, what does it mean to be African?
What does it mean to be African? To be African is, for me, at this point in time, I think it's just acknowledging or being aware of the richness that you have actually spiritually, and that you can create anything or be anything in a mad world, in a mad society. As an African, you have so much resources, and through music, through acting or being an actor. An African is somebody who creates, I think, for me.
I love that.
Muneyi? I think for me it's just being brave, Like, we live in a world, like you said, you're in an ever-changing world where you can be a global citizen, you can move around with that identity. But I think just the bravery of just sticking to what you know, and, just the knowledge systems that, raised me, what I know. I think, it's bravery for me. Like, it's requiring so much bravery.
Cara, what does it mean to be African?
Well, I can say what it means to be a white South African, which is a conflicted position, which I think, it's hard and confusing, but I think that's also, there's a real productive space in that, to think about your position here, to think about what's happened here before you arrived in South Africa. But I think it's also, I think a big part of that is to not stop listening and learning from other experiences that are around you, and just understanding this complex place that we're in. And I think, just more broadly, I'm just noticing so many places around the globe turning to Africa and turning to South Africa to listen to what's happening in our artistic spaces, which I think is just a really empowering, beautiful moment to be appreciative for.
That's so powerful. I want to know your story. I want to know what it means to you to be African. What does it mean to create from a place of inspiration and being surrounded by this beautiful continent? Do make sure you comment, interact with us, and let us know your story this Africa Month. A big thank you to Standard Bank Sponsorships for having us and for championing these conversations. From myself, the African Powerpuff Girl, who's on the side today, Zulu tomorrow, Bailey any day, and that's the beauty of it all. That's the beauty of being African. Stay tuned for more episodes of this podcast, because the timeless moments don't end here.